Hello and welcome to Audionaut. Today we are checking out the new multiband compressor from BLEASS.
Can multi-band compression be sexy? It's never been sexy before. Does BLEASS do it?
Let's delve in and find out.
All right, well, how about we get into BLEASS? They've got a new plugin coming out, I believe, tomorrow for $29. It's a multiband compressor, and they were kind enough to send it over to us to check out before it comes out. And I just want to give a quick disclaimer that they sent it over to us, but they don't have any say in the content or our opinions. They're our own. And Curtis is the one that got to check it out. He's got a video for us. But Curtis, anything you want to say before we cut to the video?
Multi-band compression has never been sexy, but BLEASS made it sexy.
Until now.
We'll get let's get into it. It's assuming that everyone knows what multi-band compression is, what it does, and what the difference is between multi-band compression and compression. If listening back or whatever, you're a bit unsure, then we can always have a conversation about it later. Let me just
give a quick preamble to that then. So multiband compression is basically 4 compressors or multiple compressors in one that you can set each one to different frequency spectrums of where you want to go with the compressors. So it just gives a little more nuance in terms of control for your compression. And typically on masters, it's nice if you don't have, the full stems and because you can go, oh, the low end sounds really good, but these mids need some tweaking. You can take the compressor and do a different type of compressor setting on it and change the volumes and things like that. There's a lot more nuance and things like that, but that's kind of the quick summary of it. And so I understand what you're saying, Curtis, that it's a bit dull. It's necessary. It's an awesome effect to have, but yeah, I'm assuming the way BLEASS designs their UIs and things like that carries over to this. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. Ian, like anything you want to add or correct me on in terms of multiband compression?
No, I was just going to say, if you've ever got one of those multi-band EQ outputs where it gives you a readout and you can see everything bouncing around, you'll notice that it bounces in different frequency ranges at different times. So this is a tool that you can tune to those ranges to sit on the peaks. So you don't necessarily hear it pumping on a mix because it's compressing the different ranges at different times, potentially different ratios and speeds and whatnot. So it's a bit more subtle, but it can really help a mix. You can tighten up the low end and bring out some mids and so on and kind of balance the tone with it a bit, depending on how much you use.
I use a multiband compressor on pretty much every master I do for Audionautic records, for my music. And if you want to see how it works in terms of on a master for a track, let us know, because I am going to download the plugin and get to check it out. I just haven't had a chance. But if you want that kind of see what it's like on a master, let us know in the chat, in the comments, or on our Discord if you're watching this back either on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anything like that. But Curtis, you got to check it out. I know you said you think it's sexy. So anything else before we move over and check out what you've done with it?
No, let's save the discussion and everything. Let's go for it. It's a 9-minute video, nearly 10 minutes. Let's have a
9:57. I'm looking at it right now.
9:57. Yeah. Do you feel you're in? Do you need me to let it go? Yeah.
It should be fine if I trigger it, but maybe you should just in case.
Right. No worries. See you guys on the other side. Here we go. This is a little run through, a little first look at the new multi-band compression plugin that BLEASS sent over to us in a beta ahead of release. Thank you ever so much. Really appreciate it. And it's been really nice to play around with. This is released Thursday, 4th of April, fully. Usually multi-band compression is something which is kind of dull, not really talked about much. It's not sexy, let's face it. But it does, in this instance, BLEASS have done a really good job of making it interesting and making it fun. Now, and this is just a first look. This is just kind of what we think, or what I think, just kind of opening it up and playing through. So we're going to start by going over the UI. We're going to start going over how it looks and how it works, and then we're going to run it through some loops. I got a drum loop. Oh, you can't see because of my camera. I got a drum loop, I got a bass loop, and I got an arpeggiated synth pad loop thing. Thanks ever so much to LaunchTick for sending this over. Fellow producer, awesome guy, really good fun. Has just got this bank of samples that he just went, here, have these. So yeah, share me the love. So appreciation where appreciation is due. Thank you ever so much. So let's take a look. I have found that when it comes to synthesizers, it's better than drums in that regard, straight off the bat. But that again, that could be down to the limitations of me and where I'm at. Their presets are fine. As ever with Bliss, they send a lot of nice presets, which to get you started. They've got some emulations of OTT. They've got some classic clean masters, for example. They've got some classic side chaining, compression. And then they've got some really interesting ones like, where are we? Where is it? Disrespectful, for example. Cthulhu is real, where they just kind of really destroy the sound. So always fun to play around. If you don't know what multiband compression is or how to use it, this is a really good way to start experimenting. For now, we're going to assume that you're listening and knowing what multiband compression is and what it does to avoid this video from being too long. But yeah, so we'll have a look. So let's start with this drum loop. I'll give you the dry sound. Standard kind of housey, dancey beat, lovely, you know. And let's make this. Let's put this in. Let's play around with, for example, drum machine. So instantly, just by moving things around. You can see that we can really manipulate the different frequencies within a very defined category, relatively easy, relatively quickly. As we come in, you can see we've got a low, a mid, and a high. Standard multiband compression. Very visually pleasing and very striking in that regard, and makes something not sexy very sexy and intuitive. We can play with our bands from here and here, for example. We can move them up, lose our threshold from below and above, and we can also do the same thing overall here, which is quite nice to see on this right hand side here. You can solo your individual sounds. It's probably better, and we can mute them. So we can really get into the fine tuning and the fine understanding of what these sounds are doing inside one sample or inside one stem, for example, which is really nice to see. So instantly you can see, if we just get rid of this, and a few clicks, I can really alter the sound that I've got coming through. I can get rid of that low end. I can really push the highs. Lovely. Really nice. Straight off the bat. No messing around. Straight into it. On the right-hand side, you'll see that you've got a master, as you can see here, which, again, just dry and wet. On the general side, we've got the input, how much signal is going to come through. And we've got the percentage of attack, release, the knee, for example. And over here on the left-hand side, we've got the side chain. Now, this is one thing I will say. It could be me. It could be my own myopic experience of a shaven space monkey. The beta is a bit unstable with the sidechain unless it's in the presets. It could be me and my lack of understanding, and this is just a first look, but I have seen that this is not as responsive as perhaps I'd like it to be, and it makes me want to just do normal sidechaining through the way I regularly do it in Ableton. Again, that could be me. Fully put my hand up and say, in the time that I've spent with this, I haven't got it to work, but there may be something I'm missing, something to do. The sidechaining presets, however, do work quite nicely. So we'll have to see what happens upon release tomorrow. Again, Thursday, 4th of April. We have a look at it, right? So that's what happens if we put the multiband compressor itself on a drum loop. Quite nice. Can instantly play around. Do you want something that's crunchy? Do you want something that's quite thin? Do you want to ultimately move it around? That kind of thing. Quite nice in that regard. Let's come along to the bass, because this is where things really start getting interesting. As you can see, I've got a couple on here that, because I've been playing around. I'll just give you my dry signal first. Perfectly beautiful little piece of EDM music there. No, I'm going to leave that one for now because it's a sidechain, but I am going to bring up this one. Let's get rid of that for now. Standard bass boost, for example. what I love about this plugin, especially on the low end, I really like looking at the low end, is that if you are boosting, say, the low end, with many multiband compressors, I find is that you lose the clarity in the mid-range, for example. But with this plugin, that's just not the case. You can boost the lows, and you don't have to necessarily sacrifice the compression of the mids, and you can make them work in a nice balance. And I really like that with this plugin. So, for example, like, now that is a really low end sound where the low end is completely overpowering the rest of everything, right? But if we come back to it, we can now bring in the mids without any sacrifice of sound, and can allow for that crunch while that overly boomy low end. Now, that might be not what, but maybe it is what you're going for, and this is a really good way of doing it. So let's bring that mid range back in. So yeah, so with sound, we can say, hey, that's not just a EDM dubsteppy kind of low end bass. We can do so much with that. And the wonderful thing about BLEASS, always, whether you're looking at their mono synth, whether you're looking at the mega synth, the megalit, for example, their alpha synth, whatever, their wonderful thing is their modulation capabilities, which is what brings me across to this sample. As you can see from the offset underneath here, everything can be manipulated, which is really nice to see, and it's really it's dope in that regard, because you can really get into the nitty-gritties of what you want to see. So I just want to show you what you can do with this in that regard. I've got a standard multiband compressor here. I'll show you the dry signal. Standard, really nice standard lead line, arpeggiated lead line. Now, if I modulate the band between the low and the high, I can grab a little filter in there, right? So if I turn on my LFO in the bottom right, as you can see, which is cool. We've got modulation there. And then, okay, so let's do the same with the high band frequency. So let's put an LFO, put another LFO in there, and suddenly let's do the high band frequency for that. That's going to go all over. The ability to modulate and the ability to manipulate the sounds that come through so easily with BLEASS, we consistently see throughout.
Okay. That is a sexy plugin. Thanks for showing it. Anything you want to add now that you've by the way, I was like that arpeggio was was cool. Once you got that the movement to it, man, that really made it stand out. I like that.
It's cool.
Oh, Ross asks a question. I don't know if you know the answer, but let's find out. Ross asks, can you attach the controls to MIDI controllers to get that tactile? I would assume so. It's probably all MIDI CC. Curtis, what's your take?
Yeah, completely. It's all MIDI CC. You can, in theory, I can map it to the launch control if I wanted to. Yes, you can do anything you want in that regard. It's highly flexible.
Yeah, or you can map them to Ableton macros, and you have the same control over them that you would normally have in that way as well.
Of course, yeah.
You can put them on XY pads and stuff like that if you wanted to.
Can you imagine that standing at the other side of the room just fiddling? Great.
Eon, like, what's your take?
I like it. I think it would take a little while for me to get used to the visual display of the three bands and pulling things up from the bottom as well as down from the top. But I do think, you know, with the soloing of the three bands and so on, and the flexibility of the crossover points and all of that, I think you can use it really quite violently or as delicately as you want to, really. what I'm wondering is, you know, I'm certainly going to test it a little bit myself and run full mixes through it. One of the
That's what I
things
wanna
I
do.
do like to get from a multi-band compressor on a mix is that tightening up of the low end where you just get it to sit on the peaks a bit, so that when you get a thumping kick or something like that, it's tight. It hits, but it stops. It doesn't boom and go flabby and loose.
Mhm.
You know, it has that lovely tightening up effect where the rest of the track can kind of stay, you know, the way that it is. Maybe you're bringing up a little bit of saturation or something, but you know, you get that tightening of the low end that stops it sounding flabby and indistinct. And I just wonder how well it can sort of hit on that sort of thing, because the one I usually use is a Drama, and I don't think it's particularly subtle, but the fact that it's multi-band, you can get away with it. But yeah, I mean, it certainly looks pretty easy to use. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm kind of used to the way that they draw their user interfaces and so on, but the color coding helps, and it's all quite practical and you know, a control per feature. You know, you're not menu diving or anything to use it, are you? It's only really presets that involve that, aren't they? So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
I like
that's one of the best things with Bliss is how everything is just so easy to use. Um, it it they color code it and everything, and the UI is always so great at just kind of learning how to navigate it. I see another question, but chat, if you have any questions before we move to the next topic, either for Curtis or just about multiband compression, but about specifically the Bliss one, let us know before we move to the next topic. I just wanted to add, so it's 29 bucks. I think I mentioned it at the start, but it comes out tomorrow. Curtis, are you able to put a link in the description for Bliss?
I can.
Not description, sorry, the chat. I'll put a link in the description, and if you're watching on Apple and Spotify, please consider giving us a rating or a review. It helps a ton. But I'll have the link in the show notes as well. Bliss has sent us a lot of really cool plugins, and every single one has always amazed us with how great it is. And I mean, this is just our own opinion, but they're very good. They're pretty affordable too. One thing, a lot of them have CPU. You know, they're pretty heavy on the CPU, especially the synths. But this one, it sounds like is not. And I know they had mentioned to us that it's pretty good on the CPU. So I want to ask you, Curtis, what was your take on its CPU usage?
Yeah, pretty good in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was only running a few audio samples, but I didn't have any problems. Can report back. I'm playing around with your stems in my live stream after the show, and I will be using it there. So I can let you know.
There we go. Yeah, and this is again just a first look. I want to, like Eon Lake, put it through its paces in terms of mastering and see how it does. So if you want us to cover that and show it, let us know. We'll happily cover it in a future one. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to check it out on some masters and things. We've got some masters actually coming through from Eon Lake that I have to do. So maybe I'll throw that on there. And Ross asks, let's go to Eon Lake for this. Would you trust a multi-band for your kick?
I would trust my ears if I were testing a multi-band on a kick. I'm not against the idea. I've never tried it.
Yeah, the reason I threw it to you is because multi-band compression is usually for me for masters, where I can really control those different sections a little more, and it's maybe 1 to 2 extra dB of compression, especially in maybe the high end and the low end, a little pumping and things like that. But when it comes to a kick, me personally, I would typically shape it with EQ, filters, and just sources, you know, making the source of the kicks where I want it, and maybe try different sample layers and things like that. But that's a good idea to try it on a kick. Curtis, what about you? Oh, go ahead, Ian. Carry on.
I do often compress them. I just don't use multiband. So
yeah.
Sometimes I would key the compressor to like the bass frequency, and usually it's with the slow attack, so you get that slap that you enhance. If it needs to have more of a slap to the click part of the sound, it depends what you're trying to do with it. You might really like the top end of it and just think it's a little bit flabby. You could try just compressing the low end of it just to make it sound a little bit tight without affecting the rest of it. It's
or tame the high end, because I find a lot of kicks have a lot in the high frequencies, and it just it's not necessarily needed. Typically, I mean, you want some, But maybe
And
you
then
could use the multiband to kind of shape the high end and get a little more pump in the low end and things like
yeah,
that.
'cause you've got an output for each band, haven't you? So
Yeah,
you just
exactly.
sit on it and then
So
say, "Well, just back that off a little bit."
yeah, I'll tell you what, Russ, we'll check it out. I'll try it on a kick and on the master. I'll report back maybe in a few weeks or something, depending on life. But Smiling Eris asks, "Are you on the laptop?" I think in reference to both Curtis, but just for usage of the CPU. I'll be using it on my M2 laptop, the MacBook. So I'll report back how it is on mine as well. And also a big hello to ASF Stripe. How's it going? Welcome. Always happy to have you. How are you? Yeah, Curtis, anything you want to add before we move on?
I think it's a really good introduction to multiband compression if it is something that's still a little bit murky to you. Both for the ease of use, accessibility is only $29. And especially if you are a visual learner and if you're a visual worker, lots of multiband compressors that are not stock, I find at least, are all full of knobs and they're all kind of emulated from analog sources, for example. And that can get quite a bit dull and quite a bit kind of difficult to work your head around. This has that answer to that in that regard. Short and sweet.
Yeah, definitely.